I am unashamed. What about you?
Because we're doing 9 tomorrow as well, so we don't have to be in a hurry.
Okay.
All right, ready?
Yep.
And 3, 2, 1.
So on the last podcast, we found out about Jace's weekend. It was quite the story, wasn't it, Dad? Dad said, I didn't know that got laborious, that story. I was like, well, I don't know about laborious, but I sure wouldn't have wanted to be Jace. So what did you do, Dad? What was your only day you traveled to town is Sunday? What happened? Give us your day.
Well, there was a couple that visited a week before last, and the lesson pricked him. So we had one of the brothers baptize him, so he was born again. And during the lesson on sin that Jesus frees you from by dying on the cross, during that lesson, he was doing the very things that I was mentioning. I said, some of you, you're sleeping together, having sex together, but you're not even married to one another. I said, you need to marry. I said, you marry them, then you can have all you want.
I bet he was a little nervous during that because you didn't know that, right?
I didn't know their situation at all. But anyway, I just brought it up. So he comes forth, and they baptize him back in the back there, and he confessed Jesus as Lord. He said he's ready to repent and change his life. So he leaves. They go back to Missouri, where they contact somebody down here, one of the sisters, I think, and said, Phil brought up his thing about waiting till you marry before you can have sex with your woman. And the guy said, we never got married. And he said, but we need to, and I'm ready to get married. We both are. So somebody contacted me and gave me that information. I said, get on down here. And I said, we'll marry you. I said, no problem. So when I first saw him Sunday morning, they had some pretty nice duds on, and the girl had, his woman, she had a kind of a long flowing dress, like a wedding dress. So they come down, and I walked up, I reached in my billfold, and I said, it cost me $25 back in the 60s, late 60s there, to get married to Miss Kay, because I was in the same situation y'all are in. I said, so I had to pay some justice of the peace, $15 and $10 for the blood test, so it cost me $25 to get in it. I reached in my pocket and I said, here's $50. Most of the time you're paying the people. In this case, I'm giving you $50 to help out on your gas money when you go back to Missouri.
Well, I thought it was the inflation, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I just said, here's 50, we giving you $50, and you get married, it doesn't cost you anything. It's cover your license or whatever. You got it? He said, that's pretty cool. I said, hey, go for it.
He took it?
So Owens, yep. So Owens gets up, and it was a short wedding. I said, this wedding has features about it that date back a couple hundred years. I said, this is the way they did it. I said, so we'll do the same. He said, fantastic. So Owens gives him a few words. You may now kiss the bride. Got a pretty good little round of applause from about 30 or 40 people. So he went on his way rejoicing. So I felt pretty good about it. So now he's a son of God, and she's a sister, already a sister. Now they've got everything patched up, got the marriage license, legal. I said, now have all you want, legal.
So he married Jesus, then he married his woman.
Married Jesus and married his woman.
All right.
All in about an 8-day period.
Which I've always used that as an illustration, talking about marriage and how that, basically you're not married, but you lead up to that point where then you are, and something changes. And I've always used that as the same illustration of baptism. It's like the ceremony at the end of the idea, the culmination.
When we married him, which was about 30 minutes earlier than we normally meet there, became a little early. It just so happened that a guy and his woman out of Los Angeles, California, I reminded them I said, where y'all from? I said, we fixing to marry. There's a couple here. I said, where y'all from? Y'all are a couple here. Y'all married? They said, no, we're not married. I'm like, I said, where are you from? He said, Los Angeles, California. I said, you look perfectly normal, but I doubt it. So anyway, he sat there. He confessed Jesus as Lord. Right after the wedding, I gave him a little 30-minute sermon, 25-minute sermon. So he moved on it, Al. So the guy from L.A. was born again while we were at it with the ones that got married. So the kingdom, I'm just giving people here kind of the way the kingdom is working here, you know.
Yeah. And I will say this, was our audience is spread out all over the country. You can get married wherever you are, so don't feel like you
That's
just
right.
have to.
They don't have to come down here.
You can do it
And
there.
they don't
You
have to let us baptize them. Somebody else can baptize them.
Same both ways. But look, it's been amazing. So while you were doing that, while Jace was having his escapades going on, I went to Michigan. I had a rare event that because we haven't been able to hardly go anywhere because of coronavirus, especially in these, I call them the dictatorial blue states, where some of these governors have locked it down and locked churches down to the point where they can't hardly do anything special or have any kind of outreach. So there was a church up in Midland, Michigan, and great people. And it was basically just, I felt like I was in Michigan, which is way north, but I felt like I had just walked into, West Monroe, Louisiana with the mindset of the people that were there. It was incredible.
Well,
And and so we did the event outside. So when they first told me that we were going to be doing an outdoor event in Michigan in February, I was like, I don't know, boys. I am Southern through and through. And, I don't do too well in cold weather. Everything we got here doesn't stand up too well there. And so I started looking at their temps. Well, 2 weeks ago, we were going through all our stuff. They were like negative 20 at this place I was at. And so I thought, I don't know, you boys sure we can do an outdoor event? And they're like, oh, we're doing it. So we'll have fires, they said, to keep everybody warm. So I get there, and it was pretty cold when I first got there. But wouldn't you know that the Almighty warmed it up to 46 degrees with sunshine the day that I spoke, because there was snow everywhere, from what had been there before.
Yep.
But these people are like in short sleeve, to them, it was isn't it balmy? Of course, I was triple layered, had all the heaviest stuff on, my gloves, because it was still cold to me, but it turned out to be fantastic. But here's what I was going to tell you guys. So, I shared Jesus with them. It was great. They had invited all these people who were hunters, it was like a wild game deal. They fried fish. They had fried deer steak and all this that they were doing for the folks. No cost. Just come and hear about Jesus. And I think there were about 500 that were there. We were all outside. And but over and over and over again when I was meeting these folks, because they were like, the guys that organized, they said, are you like, with coronavirus, do you want to just stay in a room back here? Or would you meet folks? I said, I'm here to meet people. Talk about Jesus. I said, you guys are in this state with this governor that has just locked everything down. I have come from a free state, and I want you to know that around the country, we're still sharing Jesus and doing what we've always done. Of course, they were getting fired up. But I started meeting people, and person after person after person kept saying, man, I listen to your podcast. We don't miss the podcast. And one guy came up and said, I just became a Christian. I just accepted Christ 5 weeks ago because of the podcast. Now I'm in a church that I got in a couple of weeks ago. So it was just over and over. I was just shocked. I couldn't believe that there were so many people in this area that are part of the podcast, which I know they're listening. And I just want to tell you guys, you treated me great while I was there. And I wanted to bring a little hope and encouragement to this situation, because you mentioned it last time, Jess. People are so, broken down by how bad everything is in our country that they need that. They need an uplift.
Yeah, it's like when I was telling the story about the fan who saw me and he thought I was just on Skid Row. His parting words were, good luck to you. And I thought, that pretty much means that maybe I'll just get lucky. You're a loser, I just was listening to what people say, that they're trying to in some way encourage you, but it's like 100% sarcasm also. It's just like, yep, here you are, big TV star. You're walking around. Next thing you know, you'll be playing a tune with an open box.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like, which I just didn't say. No, my wife's coming with a accurate credit card to follow the rules of society.
Well, that's why I was so intrigued by your story last time, because obviously I had to fly, but I didn't have any trouble. But then I was like complaining to Lisa, just having to wear the mask the whole time, because the whole process is 7 or 8 hours, and I have sinus problems, I have problems breathing, and it's misery for me to spend that long with my face covered. And now, like you said, they're like, this is federal law. First thing you do get on now, it's about 5 minutes of all the rules beyond what they normally do, just all new stuff. So I was kind of glad.
A guy like me, I never had the virus. I never wore a mask. I've now have the vaccine, both shots. So how much of a danger am I to my fellow man? I never had it. I never had it.
I don't know,
I
but
didn't get it. I didn't wear a mask.
Every 5 minutes, they would say, even if you've had the vaccine, you need to wear. They would come over on the intercom. So.
I thought a vaccine meant you couldn't get it 96% of the time. So who am I? Somebody can't give it to me. I've been vaccinated. I can't give it to you. I've been vaccinated. What's the deal with the mask? And I need to hide.
The problem with rule-oriented ventures is that there's no room for common sense.
And here's the thing, Dad. So you're being 100% honest, right? Because we live honest lives. Like I've been vaccinated. If you live by a rule system, you assume everybody's lying. So you can't have room for somebody to say, hey, boys, I've been vaccinated. I'm no longer a threat. I'm not going to wear the mask. Oh, no. We don't know that. So their next thing is, and this is probably going to happen, then you got to have some kind of proof card. You got to have a card that says you've been vaccinated, so that you can't just go because you told them. I got to have this thing. So now the only way you're going to be able to travel, I can almost guarantee you.
That's the problem is you got to have rules. I mean, we get it, but it's like, what's the motivation for them, and where does it stop, and how are you making them? Which is why voting's important. You get people making laws, and I mean that's what they do. But you can see when
it's an agenda. They have an agenda.
When the wrong people get in charge, it just goes so far down a rabbit hole.
That's right.
That even like changing the policy on what kind of covering is. That's where we're at now. You don't have an approved structure of cloth that might work. There's no guarantee that it's going to work. Anyway, they're like, well, science has proven that it works. Nobody asked me to participate in the study, on whether a cloth, because I felt more comfortable wearing the gaiter. I feel like, I've created just a cave that I've now put my face.
That's
right. They
right.
handed me one that had open places everywhere.
That's right.
I'm like, I like mine better. I disagree with your rule, but
especially, Jace, if you have a beard, that's even more. The beard pushes it out. Well, let's take a break. Well. You never thought COVID could make you lose your home, did you? Did you ever think that, Dad?
Never crossed my mind.
Well, you didn't get it, so thank goodness. But yes, the reason why is because cybercrime is up 75%. And by far, the most serious cybercrime to worry about is home title theft, because the title to your home is somewhere digitally kept. You get somebody hacks in, they get your title, they put their name on it, they borrow a bunch of money in your name, and all of a sudden you get foreclosed on, and you didn't even know that you didn't have your house. So it's sad, but it has happened to people. So you may want to check this out. Go to HometitleLock.com. You register your address, make sure you're not already a victim, that you still own your house. And if you use the code RADIO, they're going to give you 30 free days of protection to protect your title, make sure someone doesn't get it. So that's HometitleLock.com. Use the code RADIO. Protect your home. I didn't have as many problems as you did, Jace, but one thing did happen to me that's never happened in all my years of travel, and I travel a lot. So we didn't get a car. You usually get a car if you're going to be someplace. We were there a couple of days. I didn't get a car because the places in this airport, if you come in after they just close, If you come in after that time, you can't get a car. So I thought, well, that's fine. We'll figure something out. So we called the hotel. The hotel sent a car to get us. Great. Get to the hotel. Ask the hotel, can you take me to the event? Yeah, we'll take you to the event. So they're basically taking us to the couple of places we had to go. So we get back, and I was like, "Can you guys take us to the airport in the morning? Because now, it's getting kind of late by the time we got back to the hotel." And they were like, "No, we can't take you in the morning because we don't have a person here that can drive you. But here's a couple of taxi companies." I said, "No problem. We'll hire a taxi." I said, "Do you have Uber?" "No, we don't have Uber here." Well, we call the places. Now it's like 10 o'clock at night. Well, Saturday night, we're flying home on Sunday. Well, they don't answer. So I was like, okay. So we left a couple of messages. So one of them called us back, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we only have one driver. He's already busy at that time. We got to go to the airport." And so then we start looking to try to find some other taxi companies. They're not open on the weekend. So basically, I'm in the hotel. It's 10:30. I got to be at the airport at 6 o'clock. I don't have a ride.
Yeah.
And I looked at Lisa and I was like, I don't know what we're going to do here. So the only contact I had was the guy who did the event. His name is Adam. And thank you, Adam. I know you listened because you saved us. So I texted him. The problem is Adam's got like 5 or 6 kids. He was in the bed by 10:30.
Hitchhiking is always an option. I didn't say it was a good option. It is an option.
It's not too good when it's cold either.
Or a horse.
In the 50s, been no problem. Now,
Yeah.
2020, no.
But I mean, it crossed my mind
Hitchhiking's out.
in my situation. I thought if I can catch a ride, I mean, I have done it fairly recently. I went to a worship conference and got stranded at a restaurant, and I forgot the details of it, but I just announced. I figured most people in the restaurant had gone to the worship conference, so I just hollered out, "Will anybody give me a ride?" And
I bet you got some looks, didn't you?
yeah, but one guy said, "Yeah, I'll give you a ride." I mean, okay.
Being neighborly is pretty well gone in America. Well, let's see what old Saul of Tarsus is up to.
I think Dad's ready to shift out of travel.
I done heard enough traveling stories.
All right, so we've been in Acts 8, and I want to kind of set up before we get to Acts chapter 9, which to me is one of those pivotal. We've had a couple of moments that were big, but we're about to get to a huge pivotal moment in the church. But I want to go back and just remind the audience in Acts 8, we kind of talked about at the beginning of that, it was right after Stephen had been martyred. And so the church was like, man, they underwent all this great persecution. And of course, we know that Saul is there. He's dragging people off to jail. People are being killed for their faith. I mean, it's a scary time. And yet out of that, Philip goes to Samaria and then also talks to this Ethiopian that we talked about before that was kind of on the road to the Gaza. And then he was teleported to his next place. But there's we didn't talk about this last time, but Jason, I want you to touch on this. So in your Bibles, and I'm not sure it's in every version, I know in the NIV, if you read 36, they traveled along the road. This is Acts 8. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. Why shouldn't I be baptized?" And in the NIV, it goes to 38.
Yeah, there's no 37. Which seems like if you Google this from people who don't believe, they're like, "Oh, we found an error in the Bible. They missed 37." But in most Bibles, they have a little letter there. When you go down to your bottom margin, it will say some late manuscripts say, "Why shouldn't I be baptized?" They just start at baptized. And then 37 in the late manuscript says, "Philip said, 'If you believe with all your heart, you may.' The eunuch answered, 'I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God,'" which is not unlike what happened in Acts chapter 2 and other places when Peter said, "The Lord you crucified, he is Lord and Christ, the Son of God." Where's that, 36 or whatever? And it says, when they heard this, they were cut to the heart. So it's like the same confession or declaration, and we're all familiar with Romans 10:9 and 10 is probably the most quoted outside of John 3:16 that says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Yep.
And what you got to remember, that's 4 chapters after Romans 6, which is when he said, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? And he's like, don't you know that all of us who were baptized,
We died to sin.
yeah, we died to sin. We were baptized into his death. We were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead to the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. Well, and that's just a few chapters from Romans 1, which is where our podcast, the verse that we singled out, talking about the gospel that brings salvation to all men, we're not ashamed of the gospel. So my point is, it's, because it wasn't in the earliest of manuscripts, the 100 men who got together and said, let's put this from the manuscripts into the Bible.
Right.
They said, well, we'll just, since it wasn't in the earliest, that one phrase, so they would find different writings of the scriptures that we'll just make a note there. I mean, it doesn't bother me at all because there's nothing inconsistent with what he said. I mean, to me, the more important point, especially when it comes to baptism, and I did a lesson on this one time, is a lot of people look at baptism and they ask a question. You've heard it probably. I'll ask you how many times y'all have heard this. How many times have you heard people say, well, do I have to? I've heard it many times.
Many times.
People want me to answer that question. I share Jesus. Jesus, you're saved through Jesus 100%. His death, his burial, his resurrection, his mediating work. Jesus is salvation. And they're like, well, what do we do? Same kind of question in Acts 2. So, well, and we start talking. We'll bring up Romans 10, 9, and 10. You confess with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, what Philip did. We get to baptism. You can use Romans 6 for an example. You reenact Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And then sometimes people say, well, do I have to? I've always said, I think that's a bad question. Mm-hmm. I think the better question is what the eunuch said. Why shouldn't I?
Yeah.
I mean, that was his response. They were going along the road, and we talked about Acts 8
He
a couple of times.
He didn't know who Jesus was.
Philip explained the good news of Jesus. That's in verse, it's right before that.
And he had never heard about being baptized, I don't think.
35. Philip began with that very passage of Scripture, which was the Isaiah prophecy, and told him the good news about Jesus, which I think it's a valid question. What is the good news about Jesus? Because it doesn't go into detail. It just said he began right there. Who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else? Philip told him the good news about Jesus. So what is the good news about Jesus?
Hey, Jase.
What Isaiah said.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. So, Jase, we've talked about it before. Who's the biggest human resources nightmare? Would it have been you or Cy? Because you're not both there anymore at Duck Commander. But which one of you would have been the bigger nightmare for human resources?
I think I probably got in more trouble than Cy, which is shocking at Duck Commander. There were more meetings about me than Cy. So I'm not something to really be proud of.
Getting to know you.
I went by that mode of that Clint Eastwood movie when he came into that court system and he's like, what? And Eastwood was sitting in the judge's chair and he went, get out of here.
Yeah.
That's the way I felt when people walked into my duck call room.
Well, so if you've got an employee that was at all like Jase or Cy, then you know about human resources. And now with all these new legalities that have come along, with every administration and government, you got to hire a person to be able to do it, unless you had another option, which you do. It's a company called Bambee, Bambee. Basically, you get a dedicated HR manager for just $99 a month. So they're going to be able to help you out month to month, no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. So check them out. You get a free HR audit if you go to Bambee, BAMBEE.com/Robertson. Get that free audit. find out how you can help your business. That's Bambi.com/Robertson.
He was pierced for our transgressions.
Yes.
And they put him in a tomb with the rich man,
Yes.
the rich man's tomb. And then he will see the light of life. It's a gospel
good
sermon.
news. This is good news. This is
Somebody
good news.
died, was buried, and raised from the dead.
So
and
they're traveling down and they see some water, and he says, "Why shouldn't I be baptized?" That's a good question. Why is that not a good question?
And how would he have even known about baptism?
So if Philip said in verse 37, "If you believe with all your heart, you may." Because why would he say that? Because if you don't believe in Jesus, is that he's the Son of God, that he died and he was buried and resurrected, why would you want to go down in some water and have someone dunk you?
Yep. As Peter would say, you're not taking a bath.
That's a good one. 1 Peter 3:21.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not a bath. It's a pledge of a good conscience toward God.
I would argue that you spend most of your life putting yourself in a position where no one can take you and dunk you underwater.
Yeah.
Because you stay down there too long, you drown. So it's in every human being's,
Well, it's a humbling experience for a person to just are basically giving up and to themselves and giving in to what they've heard. If you just show them and they look at that, and it's a humbling thing because someone else has you by the nape of the neck. Someone else is pushing you under the water. I mean,
I would call it a surrender.
It's a surrender.
And I'll bring that up because of this. If you go back to what the eunuch was reading in verse 32, it says, "He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before the shearer is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of justice." Well, seems like to me that is the definition of surrender.
It is.
And so then Philip begins with that very passage of Scripture, tells him the good news about Jesus, and the next question is, look, here's some water. Why shouldn't I be baptized? I'm making the analogy, why shouldn't I surrender?
Yeah.
Based on Jesus, the good news of his surrender for me. And Philip had to have discussed it. Where did this baptism come up? That's not even in nowhere else. He just saw some water. Why would he have that thought? At some point, Philip had to bring that up.
Had to bring it up.
And I think he brought it up as a positive. He was like, this is good. You can participate in this. So instead of saying, do I have to, which to me seems the opposite of surrender, which seems a little arrogant, it would be a better question to say, why shouldn't I?
And why is the rejoicing phase of this story? When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch didn't see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. What's he rejoicing about it? As soon as they come up out of the water.
Participated in the greatest being in the history of the world, which is Jesus. So when yeah, go ahead, Al.
Say, you hear it. Paul, who we'll eventually get to in the next chapter, does a really good job in writing the epistles about describing, what happens, the purpose of it. And of course, one of them is in Romans, where you said it earlier, Jase. It's a reenactment of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and rising up of him. And so, when you think about it, it's a brilliant, symbol to use, because you're being put to death and coming back to life, and this idea of giving up your life to Christ and surrendering it. And what better way to show that than to be able to reenact what Jesus did? And so that's how Paul described it to the Romans. And then what was it, Colossians 2, where he talked about, was that where he talks about the
spiritual circumcision?
Spiritual circumcision, which again, that audience would understand that, what he was trying to say to them, the idea of cutting away that which is human and has been in charge of your life, and now Jesus being that for you. So you see a lot of great illustrations about
Paul told Titus it was when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us, not because of righteous things we had done, because of his mercy. He saved us, and he phrased it, through the washing of rebirth.
Yeah.
Washing of rebirth. What does it mean? And renewal by the Holy Spirit, whom we poured out on us generally through Jesus Christ. Washing of rebirth, reception of the Spirit, repent and be baptized, God will give you the Spirit, the Ethiopian eunuch. But I think it's too simple to miss. Jesus is the one who said, go make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's exactly what Philip did. That's what he did.
Well, exactly. And we've talked about before, Mark 16, where he said, whoever believes and is baptized, will be saved. Go preach the word, good news to all creation. Then it says, whoever does not believe will be condemned. And I've had people ask me, they're like, well, how come it didn't say baptism there? Do I have to? That was their example. I'm like, well, just, you're not thinking.
If you don't believe in Jesus, there's no use in getting wet.
Don't elevate baptism to a point to where that's some kind of important thing in and of itself. It's not.
That's right.
Only Jesus is what's getting you forgiven and resurrected.
Yep.
And that relationship will be your bedrock for the rest of your life and throughout eternity. But it's the reason, it's kind of the same argument that we talked about over the legalism. We all want to follow the rules. We all want to do right. It's the motivation is what counts. If you're doing it to make yourself feel like you're worthy rather than you're not worthy and everything you've got is by the grace of God, that's a huge difference when we're both living right. That's why a lot of churches who are basically doing good things with their life seem dead, because it's not Jesus grace motivated. It's a selfish look at themselves saying, well, look how great I am. I mean, I haven't said a cuss word in 17 years and 5 weeks, 2 days. Well, great.
Remember we were talking about empty rituals last time about the washing of hands? We got into that a little bit. It would be the exact same thing with baptism. If you baptize someone and they don't know Jesus and they don't know that they've surrendered to him, then all you've done is just, you're like you're chicken fighting out in the swimming pool. You haven't done anything. You haven't connected to Christ, because that's the idea about submission. And unfortunately, in the religious world, that's what happens a lot of times. People are just, they're baptized. They have no idea why.
Well, look, Al, I do this a lot. This week, you were talking about you're doing your event. I got an event in Florida this week. So I'll give you a report when I get back. And I'm talking to young people. And something I do with young people, and when people who are raised in the church, and let's say they accept Jesus and they're baptized, and then their life just goes off the rails. Well, then later on, you're trying to figure out, how can I help this person? Because they were already in, and I mean, I think this is a common problem with a lot of young people in churches. But a question that I ask that seems to work real well, because I'll go through this thing about priorities, and a lot of their struggles with teenagers today is that they compromise their character in order to be included and to have friends. They just throw everything they were taught and that they vowed just in those moments to try to be accepted. But one thing I'll do to try to figure out what the problem is, I'll say, do you remember, when you accepted Christ, or tell me about that? And they usually say, yeah, I was at a church thing and I cried and I was baptized. And so I'll say, well, who did you bury? And they're like, what? I was like, you said you were baptized. Who did you bury? And they usually kind of have trouble figuring out what I'm talking about. I was like, well, there was a death, and I'll read the Romans 6. You were crucified. You were therefore buried. And then you were raised a new person. Well, who did you bury that day? And it always causes them to stop and think. And then I ask the next question, are they still here? And it's usually yes. Well, and it makes them think. And I thought about that watching, crime shows when there's a question of who committed a crime or who's dead. And what we'll do in a physical way is they'll go dig up the body. At some point, they have the cameras and we're going to go dig up the body. Well, if you dig up the body and there's nobody, you dig the grave and there's nobody there, well, all heck breaks loose. Well, we don't even have a crime. This person's not even dead.
That's why I told my buddies when they arrived and said, let's go up the road. And
Hang on. Let's take a break.
they said, let's go up the road, Robinson, drink a beer. And I said, no. I said, the one you're looking for, the old Phil Robertson, he died. And I said, it was buried. And they looked at each other like, do what? I said, the one you're looking for died. This is the new one. And they couldn't put it together. I said, the new one says, don't go anywhere with that bunch. Get away from them.
Yeah.
So they leave. I finally converted one of them after 12 years. But at the time, they had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, the one you're looking for has died and been buried. This is the new one. He doesn't get drunk anymore. He quit that.
You know what? I have a new thought I want to unleash on y'all. And see
They looked at me like I was crazy, by the way.
I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought this. And so y'all can either say yay or nay. But I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this thought. My thought was that the evil one, Satan believes in the death, burial, and resurrection. And you say, where are we going with this? Well, you remember when Moses died, there was a dispute
Over his body.
Yeah, with the evil one. I'm not, Al, you remember where that was? Jude 6?
Jude 6, yeah.
Yeah, Jude 6. It was a dispute. Because you look at all the verses that talk about the evil one. He was a murderer from the beginning. In Hebrews 2, when it says Jesus destroyed him who had the power over death, that is the devil.
Yep.
So his mode of operandi, his entire existence has been to kill you physically. And you say, so we know he believes in death because he wants to kill you physically. Even when Jesus said, don't be scared of the one that can, kill the body. But he wants to resurrect that old self that you buried. That's his prime initiative. You think about it. He doesn't want that old self that you buried in Romans 6
stay buried.
To stay buried. He believes in the resurrection of your old self. I just thought it was an interesting thought. You tell me yeah or no. He believes in the physical death and the spiritual resurrection of the old self, which is counterproductive of what Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection represents.
And I've always think a bigger question of that is the why of that. I mean, we don't really know. We just kind of surmise. But you mentioned last time we were talking about rule keepers, how that when someone is bitter and someone's not happy about having to keep a rule, the last thing they want you doing is living free. I mean, they want you under the same thing as them. I've always thought that was probably Satan's motivation. I mean, he had a fall away from God and wound up here to offer us a choice about good and evil. And so I've always thought he wanted to take down as many people as possible just out of pure bitterness.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And I want to read this because I just was quoting
actually, that was 9, by the way, Jay, not Jude 6.
Jude 9, okay. I wanted to read this one from Romans 6:6. I quoted the 1 through 4, but just to let that sink in and why it's a good question, especially with young people, when you say, who did you bury? Because that Romans 6:6 says, for we know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body of sin might be done away with.
And your baptism is simply when? He's still still talking about what he was talking about earlier.
Right. He said in verse 2, we died to sin. How can we live any longer? Don't you know that all of us who were baptized into Christ were baptized in his death? We were therefore buried. That's what triggered the question. And then in 2 verses later, he says, we know that our old self was crucified. So the correct answer when you say, who'd you bury?
It ought to be hallelujah
it
to that
have been,
one.
yeah, my old self is who I buried, and it's still there. But when you stop and say, I don't know. I mean, look, I'm just saying it's a way to get people to think about their life and their commitment. Because you can't judge a person's heart. All you can do, and when you start going back years, it's hard to remember what was happening, and you're just trying to get them to think, have you made Jesus your Lord? Have you declared Jesus Lord and you surrendered to him? So I think I wish verse 37 of Acts 8 would be moved up to its proper place. But since I didn't look at the manuscripts and I don't know, it can still be there. But I love the point.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, exactly. And back to your other point, and you remember the context by which Paul says all that in Romans 6 comes out of his discussion in Romans 5, when he ends it by saying the law was added so that trespass might increase. And we had a question about law last time. But where sin increased, grace increased all the more, so that just as sin reigned in death, so also grace might reign through righteousness to bring eternal life through Jesus Christ. And he starts in the next, which is not really a chapter in a letter, it's just the next thought is, what do we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means, you died to sin. And so that kind of goes back to the discussion we had last time about depending on law somehow instead of grace to now live this new life. It's not about going around and counting the times I messed up versus the times I didn't mess up, or the times I kept the law or did something good versus the time I didn't. It's a new life in Christ that's now totally changed and totally different.
I think in the simple answer to that is, you think about it. If a person is lost, dead in his sins or her sins, there has to be a point, an exact point in time when they go from saved to, when they go from lost to saved. Well, there has to be a point in time, Al.
Yeah, but figuring all that out is very difficult to, articulate. And to me, I'm not so much concerned about it.
If the old person is being buried.
I know what you're saying, but I'm not concerned about it if your heart has been pricked by Jesus and you're doing it with a sincere heart in Jesus. I think you figure out these details as you move along. I mean, because to me, we just don't talk about it because people always think you have to look at it the same way. I mean, to me, most graveyards you go to, it's a sad place because you have these memories. We don't ever visit our spiritual graveyards, which I think we should every once in a while. The place you were baptized, and you say, yes, that was a good death right there. I'm happy that you're dead. I hope you stay dead. I mean, it's a totally different attitude at the graveyard, but we don't think that. You read that verse, I'm pretty sure that's what it's saying.
There was let's take one last break. There was and I've loved experiencing those moments with people. I think I mentioned on the podcast a guy from Pennsylvania that was baptized at WFR, and he came for Dad to be baptized where Dad's at on Sunday, but they weren't meeting because of the ice storm, but we did. And so I baptized him, but he come up out of the water, just those hands were high, it was just like, yes, celebration, and I love that reaction because it was like he recognized in that moment. It was like, man, I'm a new person now. And
the guy from LA did the same thing.
But a lot of people try to make this an automated system where if you just do these 5 things in response and you're in, and somewhere the relational, heartfelt aspect of encountering Jesus gets lost somewhere in there. So it's like you got to be careful talking about how we respond, because how we respond is insignificant to what you're responding to and who. You're surrendering, so you're really, I don't even know if that is a response. I mean, surrender, it's like the most humble response you could possibly do, which is why I think God chose it, honestly.
It goes back to that point we made last time from Matthew 7, Jase, because remember, these people Jesus said there's going to be people that said, did not do this, did not do this, did not do this. I mean, they got the checklist of what they thought made them right. And he's going to say, away from me, I never knew you. The only reason he can say that is because he has no relationship with this person. I mean, it doesn't matter all the stuff you did. I mean, and so you don't want to make any of this a ritual that has no meaning.
All right. And I think it shows you that if you want to look at it from a theological standpoint, if basically men and women are going to sin, we need to do the opposite of what we're doing. And
Yeah.
so when you think about how do we achieve victory, it's never by surrendering in any kind of fight or altercation, which would be the perfect thing to do to God, because it's showing you that we are helpless. We're idiots. It's the George Costanza. I need to do the opposite of what I've been doing to find greatness. But that actually is true in God, because we mess up, we're flawed, and he's not. So I think that's why he chose the surrender, which would be the opposite way to attain victory.
You can't have victory surrendering, and yet that's
Because victory, is not found in us. So when you surrender, you're no longer. That's why I go back to that Galatians 2:20. I think right now in this moment of my life is my favorite verse that says, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live. The life I live to him, because he died for me and gave himself up for me. It's something like that. I'll look it up. But I love it, because you're just, where are you at in that? You're the first word, I've been crucified. I'm gone. I've checked out.
Well, not only that, and I'll say this because we're about out of time, so we'll have to get to Saul next podcast.
Here, let me quote it right out. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. There we go.
Yeah.
I relinquish. I surrendered. He lives in me.
And one of the things we talked about, you said it a minute ago, Jase, and I think you're right, is that this is all individuals coming to this point in their life where they recognize that internally. Nobody can really know this but you. And so it's not about us even. And we appreciate, so many of you when I was in Michigan talking, we appreciate being able to help influence your life through the Bible. But remember, it's not what we tell you to do. You don't want to look to men. If you're coming from Scripture, you have to be convicted and say, this is what I need to do. And the reason I say that is because a lot of you will ask about, well, I was baptized as an infant or as a young person, but I don't really think I surrendered.
Well, right.
Should I? And then they ask the question, should I do it again? And then my question back is kind of what you said, Jess. Well, should you?
Look, Al, I do it every time to see if they're familiar with the verse. Right. They say, do I have to? And I say, why shouldn't you?
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Well, but you think I have to? I said, well, why shouldn't you? And then I said, maybe you need to stop the chariot. They're like, what? You need to stop the chariot. Whoa. That's my favorite part of the whole story. Sometimes in life, you have to say, you hear what Jesus did for you. You might have been raised in the church and it just didn't sink in and you got distracted. And comes a time in life where you have to say, pull over. I'm doing this. To me, that's the powerful statement we get to argue, well, this verse should have been in there, and they missed that one little phrase, stop the chariot right now. Right. And we're in the middle of nowhere in a desert, and people would have seen it. They said, what the heck are they doing? He's having a stop the chariot moment in his life.
I've told the story on here before, but I'll quickly tell it again. When I was 12 or 13, I was baptized, and at the time I thought for all the right reasons. But when I got to be 18, and everything I had done between the time I got baptized to the end had been terrible. It was a bad tree with bad fruit, to what we talked about earlier. And so when I came back home, I sat down with Dad and I was like, Dad, I don't know what I did at 12, but I'm ready to now surrender. And so we talked about it. Dad said, well, look, we go down there in the river and do it. But I was apprehensive at first because I thought, well, I don't want to mess this thing up. And the Bible says, but finally I was like, you know what? Why have all this doubt and struggle? I'm ready to surrender. And so we walked down the river at 18 and Dad baptized me. And so from that point to this point today, I'm not a perfect man. I still sin, but I have no doubts about who I am and where I'm going. So
why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you?
Right.
Exactly. That's the question. And I would say, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? And you say, yeah, but I may have done this before. Okay. Well, why shouldn't you now?
That's right.
I usually say, why not remove all doubt?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with removing all doubt.
You know what I'm always waiting for in those conversations? Stop the car.
There was a song right there. Stop the car. You know.
I'm gonna need to listen to that then.
Yeah.
Were they
Who
talking about?
sang?
Were they talking
I
about
can't
this?
remember the old boy's name. Greg Eppinet liked him a lot. Stop the car was the name of the song.
All right, we'll get our crack staff and research that
We
and
need
find
to be
out.
playing that in the background on this. Right
Jude. His name was Jude.
Jude,
That
the
was
singer.
Yep. His name was Jude somebody.
Phil,
Right,
the plethora of meaningless knowledge that is in your head never ceases to amaze me.
Well, sometime them old rockers come up with some pretty good deal. They were all trying to find Jesus, but not many of them found him.
And I have to say, Dad's watching a lot more old rockers now that he quit watching the news as much. So
Yep.
Stop the car. I like it.
stop
I
the
like
car. That's the name of my next sermon. So thanks again to all the Unashamed Nation. Keep sending in your questions. I do want to give a shout out to Paul and Chrissa and Davis. Paul and Chris I met in Midland, so you guys were great to me up there as well. So we'll see you next time on Unashamed.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.